Welcome, listeners, to the next episode of Arts and Crimes.
Episode 37.
48, 66, hike. No, it's episode 20.
Oh, yeah. Dang. This is the 20th.
Yeah,
Wow.
This is the 20th. A monumental achievement, so my students tell me. So we've made it. Oh, I'm Kelly.
Made it?
Yeah.
We're done.
This is
That's
a
the
farewell episode.
Yeah.
If you left it halfway through Caravaggio and just said, it's over now.
It's done.
So many people would just...
At least somewhere around 40 would be unhappy
Tens
with
of
us.
them.
Yeah. There are dozens of us. Dozens.
But yes, I'm your host, Kelly.
I'm Brandon.
And I am temporary guest host Josh.
Unofficial, temporary, partially here, sometimes occasionally.
Part-time.
Part-time.
Just not willing to make that commitment.
No.
20 episodes in and you still can't commit.
No.
All right, but yes, okay, so I was so excited for this summation of our Caravaggio trilogy.
The climax.
The climax. And I just couldn't stop researching and putting in all the interesting things. And I was really proud. I was telling Brandon beforehand, I brought it down. I took out a couple pages, and it's only 14 pages long. So either our listeners will be very excited to learn that this will be a 4-part Caravaggio series, or they'll be really mad that I'm making them wait an additional 2 weeks for the really, really riveting closure of the 4-part series. But I promise, I finished all the research now. It's definitely only 4 parts.
I apologize, Ashwini.
Yeah.
I steered you wrong.
So I am sorry on that one. But yeah, I did want to also, like last week we did our little like check-in. And I wanted to follow up on that because, for starters, first thing, the song by Sleep Token, they pronounce it caramel, not caramel.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very pleased about that. But also they dropped a new song, which I can't remember the name of. It's something with a D.
Damocles.
Yeah, Damocles, that's it. And I was like, I saw that it had dropped when I was at school. Because I always play music while my students are working. And I was like, oh, I want to hear it. I don't know what the lyrics are, but it doesn't say E for like swear words or whatever. So I just played it and like listened to it while I was doing my attendance and stuff. And then I got on my phone and I bought the album. So
is the whole album out?
I pre-ordered the vinyl.
Oh.
And I got to pick a color. I picked pink because the album has a lot of pink on it. So, anyways, that's my check-in follow-up.
Oh, man. So, I wasn't sure what to even check in. I've been thinking about it. No, like, I was like, okay, I better have something for it. And I thought of something. And I was like, that's it. That's my check-in stuff. And then a few days go by and I'm like, what was that check-in thing? and I had to sit there and think about it for a while. And then I remembered and I was like, I should probably write this down. But I didn't. And as I was driving over here today, I was like, okay, what was that check-in thing?
So your check-in is that you thought a lot about the check-in. This is getting really meta.
Yeah.
Meta.
So I don't have anything amazing. And I saw the Sleep Token song drop, and I thought about listening to that and having it be part of my check-in, but I was like, I don't want to always talk about music. So I don't know. Okay, Elden Ring. I'm going to go back to Elden Ring.
Oh, fun.
Right? That's what I'm going to use. I'm going to cop out. So you and I were playing and we got the Hagel tree area. Mm-hmm. And I told you that if the Envoy Greathorn dropped, I would make a build for it.
Oh, yes, I remember.
And
this is a specific weapon. Let me just tell you, it's a horn that a giant snowman toots at you. Mm-hmm. That is the weapon.
Yeah, and it's one of the more rare weapons in Elden Ring. Not necessarily because it's rare, but to get it is a really annoying, like, to get to the enemy and kill the enemy is annoying.
Very.
And then there's a low drop chance. So a lot of people never get this weapon. And it didn't take very much effort. I lucked out and I got it. So I made a character. Well, I didn't make a character necessarily, but I looked at it, I ran the numbers, and the character that I already made worked well for this weapon. So I leveled it up. Mr. Toots is ready to go. It is a funny weapon. So I'm looking forward to showing it to you, Kelly, when we play next.
I guess it's my turn to say what I did this week. All right. So I found the text chain. This is just a funny story. It's not, but this is the stupidest thing, but it's all I could think of. So it was Easter. Michaela and I did a little weekend getaway, and we hadn't bought. My kids listen to this. Sorry, children. The Easter Bunny's not real. Mom and Dad buy the chocolate for you. Guys, don't listen to this one. Cover your ears.
You said those in the wrong order.
I'm doing great. Okay. So we were texting with, Michaela and I were texting with one of our friends, Candace, and Michaela was like, we haven't done anything. We're not ready for Easter. And she was like, we usually do this thing, but we're not doing it. So I got to start from scratch, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And I replied in this text with a friend of ours, you could copy our tradition. We buy a Snow White bunny every year. The kids play with it all morning. Then around 4, we slaughter it in the backyard and cook it over an open fire to celebrate our pagan ancestors. So if you like rabbit, you're welcome to join us. And if you don't mind the sight of blood. A lot of blood in those little guys. And she replied back, ha ha ha. So that was great. Anyway. So that's how I am in real life, which I think shouldn't surprise anyone who's listened to the pod.
Yeah.
But I'm an insane person, so that's the moral of the story.
All in good ways, though.
Yeah.
Because you didn't actually murder anybody.
Or kill a Snow White bunny.
Snow White bunny.
Yeah.
You're actually quite gentle.
Yes. They never know what's coming. The bunnies.
The bunnies.
All right, I'm ready for some Caravaggio. Caravaggio. Is it Caravaggio or Caravaggio?
It's technically spelled Caravaggio.
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 How do you say that in French?
It's an Italian name.
I know, but how would you say it if you were a Frenchman?
Caravaggio.
Caravaggio. Oh, we should say Caravaggio is.
All right, so Caravaggio. Again, I apologize. Well, I'm calling this episode Caravaggio Part 3, Section 1.
But you can't do that.
I can do whatever I want. It's my podcast.
Yeah.
It's true. Here's a new rule. No more podcast subjects that you're in love with. Because it turns out for very long podcast
For very long episodes. Which also means all previous episodes, I was like, I didn't care about them. So, the first thing is that there are, again, I think I said this last time, there's like prominent sources where we get most of Caravaggio's historical information, which is not from Caravaggio himself, but Mancini, who personally knew Caravaggio, is one of them, and his account is short. And then there's Giovanni Baglione, who was a rival painter, and he's the one that writes probably the most. Well, actually, he is the one that writes the most about Caravaggio.
Is he the one that didn't like him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did not like him. He was his rival. They, hated... There's, so much drama, and you get to find more of it as it goes. And then the third is a Giovanni Pietro Bellori, who simply just collects from these two different works and kind of embellishes them. He didn't personally know Caravaggio, and this is much later than both of the accounts. So those are really kind of the only three. And then, of course, there's historians and myself, which is not included among them. But, piecing together information from, a lot of information of Caravaggio comes from court records, because he has his name in quite a few court records throughout his entire life, but especially in Rome. And so that's where we get a lot of the information, is court records, but also city records. like, housing records and censuses and stuff like that on like where he's living and stuff. So just so you know, in Rome at this time when Caravaggio, so last we left our hero, he was already fleeing from his home in Italy to Rome because he had assaulted an officer, if you remember, and possibly killed him, but it's unconfirmed. So we're just gonna say that he was just injured, so that he doesn't have a murder already. He'll get to that
already
because he's only like 20 when he leaves for Rome. And Rome is like a huge gathering place. It is the capital of art at this time, and that's because it's the capital of the church. So it's a city of migrants sort of pieced together by these foreigners, and it was ruled by a really inflammatory moral code of honor. And so this honor was paramount. Insults were often paid back by more insults, and often that included bloodshed of some kind.
Rap battles.
Not as many rap battles.
People always getting in rap battles with each other.
But I think pretty close, because like poets and stuff would write slanderous poetry. Literally one of them, because I am going to read one later.
A filthy limerick? Wow.
But I can't read. There's two of them that were in the court case. Mm-hmm. But one of them I can't read because I couldn't do enough to edit it and make it appropriate.
Wow.
I'll send it to you guys later.
Yeah. Text it to me. I want all the juicy details.
But a really common thing that they did was to like repay any kind of debt or something. They would cut somebody's face to leave a scar on their face, and it was called a sfregio. Sfregio?
A sfregio.
Sfregio.
It sounds like a pasta dish now. Would you like a sfregio?
Definitely.
I would.
If anybody asks you, yes, say no. Because it was a slash to the face made with a blade so that it would scar.
That seems terrible.
Yeah, and that's like the climate they were in. And this is also, I say this because it comes up later. Like, it happens frequently. So
you said this was related to debt?
To any kind of dishonor inflicted on somebody. So, like, if I did something to you that was, like, tarnished your reputation or anything like that, then in return, you would come at me and leave this mark on my face to mark me as somebody that was, like, this.
So I could do that just because you hurt my feelings. There's not like a legal thing or...
No. It was just people doing it when they got mad at other people.
Hold on. So what you're telling me is that when people did crimes or offensive things or whatever, they were made more ugly, right?
Well, I mean, they
were given hideous disfiguring scars on their face.
By other people that were also doing crime.
Hideously disfigured and scarred. Almost as if the people in charge of this fine city themselves were not particularly attractive and wished to reduce the attractiveness of the city as a whole to their level.
How?
I wanted to fill the city with Cosimos.
How Cosimo of them. I don't think that was the basis because Cosimo is quite removed from this.
Yeah, he was foundational.
Yeah, he was, and he was much
They
earlier.
were all ugly except the one that got stabbed to death.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, okay, so we are in the late Renaissance.
We are in the late Renaissance.
And the Medicis have kind of
So they're in
faded
the last
out.
they're in the last kind of legs of their life. So shortly after, like towards the later part of his time in Rome, is when Pope Leo, who was the kind of final Medici, is put in office, but he dies very quickly.
Okay.
So,
I just had a picture of like a prestige HBO show called The Last Medici. And it's got like, super fancy silhouette of a pope. Uh-huh. And then he turns and he's like, and he's got just a weird, ugly face and big old Buscemi eyeballs.
Buscemi's like, I thought it was over.
We're coming for you again, Buscemi. This one's gonna be full of it.
I didn't realize this, but there's a whole show about the Medicis. Or the Medicis.
Or the Medicais.
Not them.
Okay. A whole
Which
show?
is like a drama that is on there.
Kinda like The
I
Sopranos or
yeah,
something?
yeah, yeah.
But they're all attractive in it.
Probably. I didn't
Yeah.
watch it because I was like, can't possibly be accurate. They're
They're
all
like-
beautiful.
We're gonna make that as true as possible. And they fill it with ugly people and it does terrible.
No, it's like, you know how Eddie Murphy used to play a bunch of roles?
Oh yeah,
They
same
have
guy.
Steve Buscemi playing every role in it.
I don't think Steve Buscemi's in it.
Poor Steve.
I know.
He really gets torn up by this podcast.
You know what's funny? I think he's fantastic, actually. So, Steve, it comes from a place of love.
Okay.
I know he listens. I know he's out there.
All right. So yes, it was a place that was, metaphorically ugly, and they were doing
And also literally, physically, facially ugly.
and a lot of times it was really detrimental because they would do it to anyone. So a lot of sex workers would receive this mark from doing some sort of shame to somebody.
Like bad sex.
I don't know why.
The question made you so uncomfortable. What's it for bad sex? Answer the question.
My guess honestly would be passing along a venereal disease.
All right.
I mean,
that's a good guess.
Yeah, I would be unhappy about that.
So
Bad
Although,
rating
listen.
on Yelp.
Okay, hold on a second. Sex workers
this is going to be a 5-part.
just have sex with a lot of people, and they had not invented modern methods of protection.
Mm-hmm.
They should have, every single one should have just been a petri dish of every single disease known to man. You cannot get mad at somebody. Like, if you go to a sex worker and you're like, oh, I can't, but hold on, I got syphilis from you. No, man, don't be surprised. This is what they all do all the time.
Yeah, it's true. But also, and in Rome at this time, it was a huge problem. So, the Pope at the time was really trying to crack down on, prostitution and fencing or dueling. And so, people weren't allowed to carry swords and daggers in public. And there was a curfew, so you can be out late at night. They were really trying to crack down on this. And it was something they did was they took... this is so bizarre to me. They took all of the sex workers and they put them in this same area that I forget what the word is because I deleted this on my
Vatican?
attempt to shorten the pod.
You should have known that I would have zeroed in on the sex worker angle.
But the name translated to Garden of Evil as a flip name for the Garden of Eden where all
Yeah.
these women stayed. But they would escape at night to ply their trade. So
Isn't that just more attractive? Fellas, they're all in one place. Let's go visit the Garden of Evil.
you think so? Yeah, I don't know, but it was not. It didn't look good to be visiting or sex workers. So it was a very underhanded, seedy sort of night thing. But it was actually really important. This is so bizarre. But it was really important for artists, especially poor artists for Caravaggio, to have relationships with sex workers. Because, listen to this, not because of the sex aspect.
When you say relationships,
I
you
meant
mean relations or you mean be friends with?
like friends with.
Okay.
Because the sex workers, if they liked you, they would perform certain things for free. And for the artist...
You said it wasn't relations.
Listen, let me finish. I know I'm making it sound worse. But for many artists, that service was modeling nude for them, for their paintings. Because it was illegal to model nude, but they needed nude models for a lot of their paintings. And it was expensive to hire models. And they were all poor artists, so they couldn't afford models. So throughout Caravaggio's life as a painter, even when he is doing well and making quite a bit of money, he's never good with it, and he always uses sex workers as models throughout his whole thing. Actually, there's a whole thing about it, but I don't know if we're going to get to it in this episode or the next, so I don't want to give anything away.
Oh, boy.
But yeah, sex workers are frequently involved.
Subjects
of
of Caravaggio's works.
lives. Yeah.
Interesting.
I kind of want to circle back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no,
Let's go back to the Garden of Evil. If you were to describe it, like if you drew, paint me
Remember
a
when you
picture with
said-
your
Imagine
words.
that I was
Petri dish?
visiting it.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, just so the disfigurement thing.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like maybe it wasn't okay,
Yeah.
right? So
It wasn't
this was something
sanctioned.
that people were doing, but not illegally or anything like that. Like you would be in trouble
Yeah.
for doing that.
It was an assault technically, and that's what I mean by
This is
it was
Tide
this.
Pod trending stuff.
Yeah, not good. Nobody legally supported it. And that's what I mean by it was like ruled by this kind of inflammatory code because it wasn't a legal code by any means, but it was what was important to everybody. Like their reputation was everything. And like maintaining that reputation and maintaining that appearance was paramount.
This makes me think of the Count of Monte Cristo.
When he cuts his...
Well, no, when the scene where Count Diego is
No,
it
Diego?
Dooku.
So close.
Count Dooku.
the Star Wars reference? Isn't it Count Mondiego is the one is Edmund's friend?
He's like
Yeah.
a robot
Right.
with the heart of a human being.
Yeah, nailing it. Anyway, like there's a quick.
Oh wait, which one's
There's
that?
like-
That's not Count Dooku.
That's Grievous.
You're thinking
That's
of General
General
Grievous.
Thank
Yeah.
you. All right, sorry. I'll let you finish your thought without randomly throwing Star Wars into it.
Anyway, it just like really quickly, like boom, all of a sudden there's this duel, and wham wham, the guy's dead.
Yeah.
And Diego or Mondiego ends like talking to his wife just a little bit later about how it was the guy found out about an affair, and so he had to kill him.
Yeah, yeah, and it was super commonplace. Which duels were illegal, but they happened all the time. And so actually, you hear a lot about them playing like men playing at tennis courts. There was a lot of tennis matches, and they're like, "Oh, we're out to go, at this tennis match." But it was well known at the time that tennis courts was where they would go and duel because it was a flat, even, enclosed area. So it was an even space. And you would go there with your second and 4 witnesses. So it was like 8 men gathering at a tennis court to duel each other.
We're just playing octuples tennis.
tennis.
Your
Nothing
Honor.
to see here. Nothing to see here.
Okay, I have something to say.
Okay.
Now it's my turn. Now you must all listen to me. Jar Jar Binks. Okay, no.
I would duel him.
Nobody is going to believe that they deserve to be slashed in the face, right? So wouldn't somebody slashing you in the face, you would immediately go, I slash you in the face.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the idea behind. It doesn't make any sense. It's an eye for an eye, the world goes blind kind of thing.
Except for it's a slash to the face. In the end, you all look like Cosimo.
Yeah. Well, Cosmo, I don't think had slashes to his face.
Yeah.
At the end, Cosmo reigns supreme as the only beautiful man left.
Yep. It explains so much. It was his master plan. Listen, historians should listen to this and then reinterpret everything they know about the Machiavellis, because we just cracked the code.
Yeah.
All right. Continue.
Continue. So, paragraph 2.
Oh my gosh.
So,
This is going to be a 14-parter.
all right, so it was this kind of, we've explained the climate, but it was also extremely religious. The Catholic Church had just like an absolute vice grip on everything. And in fact, religious observance was not a matter of choice. At Easter, everyone living in Rome was obliged to take communion and procure a ticket of evidence from the priest who administered the sacrament. And then they would use that ticket as a form of surveillance, and they would write down like who took the ticket, who was living with that person, how many people were in the house, like where everybody was, and keep really strict records of stuff from this. But religious art was no less subject to these kinds of supervision. So Pope Clement provided a particularly He was particularly clean to establish. Pope Clement was particularly keen to establish himself as a ruthless enforcer of the doctrines laid down by the Council of Trent. On June 8th, 1592, some of the, this is like 4 months after his election, he declared that he was going to visit all of the churches of Rome personally, and he would be inspecting the clergy, he would be inspecting like the fabric and the decorations that were in the church, all of the art that was in the church, and he didn't actually follow through with this. He only made it to 28 churches before he stopped doing it. But the threat was enough to maintain this kind of strict code that was enforced. And this directly affected all of the subject matter and all of the stuff that was being painted by artists at the time. So, Caravaggio arrives in Rome in 1592. And in the place where artists generally gathered for housing, because it was a cheap area for housing, and artists were also flooding Rome. So they would go to this to find places, to stay. And the housing there, they didn't have like air conditioning or anything. So upper levels of houses and buildings were often rented to artists because it was hot. So most people didn't want to be up there. And it had a better view of the city. So artists loved it because it was cheaper and they're poor artists. And they had a better view of the city. And there would be like two or three artists in one room, all sharing that as a living space and a working space. Because these artists were all coming from these different locations, they tended to gather in nationalities and kind of create little mini gangs of where they're from that would like then interrogate or make fun of other artists from other locations and insult their skills. And their like poet friends would write, these nasty poems and stuff about him.
It's really like a West Side Story.
A little bit, yeah, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Mm-hmm. So is this new behavior for artists? Because like, well, when you talk about like Van Gogh, he did a lot of just like, it seemed just traveling around the countryside and stuff. And
yeah.
Didn't really end up palling with a lot of other artists, and is that because Van Gogh was who he was, or is this a new behavior where artists are gathering in these metropolitan areas and interacting more with each other?
Yeah, so it's actually, I would say it's more common for artists to gather because they often want to go to where these like artistic hubs are at. And I think part of the reason why Van Gogh didn't was because of his mental disorders and anxieties and that kind of stuff. So he preferred to be alone and out in the countryside. But generally, I mean, there was a few times where he stayed with artists at a few different houses, but it always ended poorly for him.
Right.
And so I think he was sort of a standout. Although there are a lot of artists that are sort of quirky in that sense, where they end up, wanting to avoid other people because they have a hard time sharing space with other people. But usually that happens, I think, a little later when they can afford to be alone, where they sort of have to, like Caravaggio prefers to not live with other people, and later he doesn't. But when he's new and starts, he has to come here because he has nothing.
Okay.
And so I think it's a two-part thing where it's like, yes, they do want to go to where the art is a hub, but I think also artists, especially new artists, are always so poor and struggling that they'll share a room with 3 other people to try and make it so that it's as cheap as possible. Because art supplies have been and always will be expensive.
Yeah.
So, like, I was talking to my coworkers because I was ordering supplies this year, and I've spent more than I have any other year on supplies. And I was like, I swear I'm being as frugal as I can. But when I started teaching ceramics, a box of B-mix clay, which is like the most average clay you can purchase, was like $18. And I made an order for it a couple weeks ago, and it was $39 and some change.
And you make art with mud.
And I make art with mud. It should be very cheap, but actually ceramics is one of the more expensive of the arts because you have to have a kiln and all the blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it's expensive. And so...
Should we find our own mud for you?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
But it should be clay.
I think any mud will do.
I don't think so.
Okay, I have a question, an actual serious question.
Okay.
Because this, like, seems kind of fantastical, like the past, right?
Yeah.
Are there still like great cities now that draw artists, and they all come together and they produce great art and blah blah blah.
I think a lot of that happens in France.
Yeah.
Right now, I think France is still a big hub because that's where like the Louvre is at, and like all these other really famous, cathedrals and that kind of stuff. And I think the Louvre might still offer like internships or something. I can't remember, for artists to come.
Yeah, there's like artist days where the artists come in and look at stuff and
Yeah,
get inspired
yeah.
or whatever.
Well, and you've gone to a few different things, right? Your master classes where
Yeah.
artists are coming together.
Yeah, and so I think there is like little pockets of gathering, depending on the medium. Like, so for like with ceramics, there's places in like Korea, and depending on where, because Korean pottery has, ancient ties along with China. And there are some places here in the United States, but not in places where I'm at. But I think they're kind of all over the place depending on the medium. So I know a little bit better for ceramics. Because there's another really, really big one in Denmark, Glasgow, which is where I went to study for my little master class there, I guess you could call it. And it's like a ceramic research center, and it's really famous. And artists come from all over the world. Like, we would eat together, all of us. We were housed in the same building. And I got my own room because I was the only girl of the group, so that was fun. But we stayed in a big building that was originally like a horse farm that was changed into this studio. And so each like what used to be a horse stall is kind of a section where an artist could sit. So I got my own little horse stall where I could throw my pottery. And they had like this huge underground section that had clays that they were importing from all over the place, all over Europe. And we got to try, like, I got to try clays that come from like Germany and all this other kind of crazy stuff that had like insane grog. Like, one of them had such huge chunks so grog is like material stuck in it.
It's an alcoholic drink the pirates drink?
Or it's texture that's put into clay, like broken up fired pottery that's put back into raw pottery that you throw with, so it gives it this kind of cool texture. And it was so big and so heavy that I threw one pot and I had cuts all over my finger because of the shards that were in the clay, which we would never get to do. Like, I'd never had access to that clay.
Is that desirable?
I mean, it looked cool, but it was so painful that I could only throw one pot. Because I just was doing it with my hands. I was raw dogging it.
What else would you use?
Well, I mean, you could have like stuff
Sometimes
covering.
you use your elbows.
You know what?
The back of your knee.
I'm sure you could put like a covering on your fingers or something. I don't know, sponges maybe, but no. So I've been to those places and I continue to do so, but I would imagine probably France is one of the big places for like painters and sculptors and stuff.
All that still feels pretty formalized. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like. And the stuff with Caravaggio feels pretty informal.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because it was, a long time ago and everything was less formal.
Yeah, maybe. All that to say. So, in this early time period, Caravaggio would move around a lot. It shows in their like consensuses and stuff that his address changed 10 times between 1592 and 1595. He seems to have started with a painter called Lorenzo Siciliano, and he was given this name because he was a Sicilian. So I don't think that was his actual last name. That's just how one of the historians, or one of the guys that was writing his documents, his biography, named him. And this painter painted crude busts for general sale, and it was said that Caravaggio painted heads for a groat apiece and produced 3 daily.
Can I ask for a definition? You said crude busts. Is that because they were poorly made or because they were lewd?
I would say poorly made.
Okay.
Yes.
Or both.
Porque no los dos.
Yes.
I also want you guys to know that I did some math for this.
Okay.
Because I wanted to know what a groat was. He was selling his pieces for a groat each. Caravaggio was. Mm-hmm. So 1 groat equaled 4 pence. That meant nothing to me as well. So 4 pence was then changed to 2.3 euros in today's money, which also I wasn't 100% sure what that meant. So it exchanges in today's money to $2.62 USD.
For a groat?
For a single groat.
Okay.
Would be like paying $2.62 for an original Caravaggio.
That wouldn't even buy you the mud. Wait.
That's true.
No, it wouldn't buy me any mud.
What was he making these things out of?
He was painting them.
Oh.
So during this time, he met and became close friends with Mario Mintini, who shared in Caravaggio's disdain for this type of work. Mintini was also not just a friend, but he would model for Caravaggio because, again, Caravaggio was super poor. And so he had a lot of his early paintings were of like his friend or a lot of self-portraits because he couldn't afford models. Mm-hmm. Then during this time, so he was painting with this guy. And then during this time, he was lodging with a priest through his connections with the Colonnas. So if you remember in the previous episode, the Colonnas was an important family that he had connections through his mother's side. And he maintains these connections, and they're very important for the rest of his life. So the Colonnas are important. And so through them, he gets kind of his first housing, which is a priest. And he wants to maintain connections with the church because the church is the one that's making all of the like big commissions, and that's when you get famous, and you can even get knighted through the Pope for being a great artist if you have the right connections and they give you the right commissions. So he really, really zeroed in on that and wanted to make any kind of connection you can with the church, and then work his way up to the important people.
Okay. I just want to say that I just barely I finally understand now that artists are poor and they can't afford models, and that's why there's so many self-portraits instead of them being just so self-absorbed.
Yes, no, it's because the model is free. I think most artists would prefer not to paint themselves. I mean, maybe some would. I mean, who knows? But yeah. I would. Right. I've only ever done it because I had to do a portrait of someone.
I have to admit, I've always thought, like, why are they always drawing themselves?
Free model.
It's like, do you not have enough self-portraits yet?
And that's why we have enough. Yeah, and that's why we have so many of Caravaggio. So he received room and board in exchange for domestic chores that he did. The priest also took home quite a few of Caravaggio's paintings, like his own kind of payment, he decided. Caravaggio, or nobody really has any trace of them. We have no idea what happened to them. We just know that the priest took them. Caravaggio was very dissatisfied with this and did not stay very long, partially because of, I'm sure, the chores he didn't love, but also he cited that this priest only ever fed him salad as an appetizer, entree, and dessert. Just salads. And so he insulted his benefactor by calling him Monsieur Salad and left.
That is a sick burn.
I'm out of here, Mr. Salad.
I'm beginning to think that their rap battles might not have been particularly creative.
Well, I mean, it's early rap battles. So he probably spent some time in a smaller studio of Antividudo Grammatica. I'm bad at all these names. I'm really sorry. And there's little known about him other than he wasn't particularly talented.
Wouldn't that suck to be the only thing known about you? Several hundred years later, you're like, what do you know about Josh? I'll tell you about Josh. Wasn't great. Not super talented.
There was one other fact about him that was really funny. The only other fact we could find about him was that his father had a particularly peculiar sense of humor. For whatever reason.
What do you know about Josh? Was his dad liked certain types of jokes.
So yes. So after that, he started working for the brothers Cesari. It's and this is where some of like his drama really started. I mean, he was still constantly getting in like tussles and stuff, but not anything major. And this was a very short-lived time that he stayed with these brothers. So they were like well-known, fairly prominent painters, but they hired him to paint flowers and fruits. And here's what's important to know about the insult that is having Caravaggio paint flowers and fruits. So there was a very clear hierarchy of for painters, for artists, right? So at the very, very top was artists that painted human figures shown in heroic or significant action, especially biblical or mythological. That was top tier artists did that. Then right below that was portraits. Underneath that was animals. Below that was landscapes. And then very, very far below that was people that painted flowers and fruits.
Was still life.
Was still life flowers and fruits. Yes. So Caravaggio felt that the brothers had done this to slight him because he felt that he was more talented than they were. And they were keeping him painting these things because they were afraid that he was going to outshine them. And there's other people that cited that that was true. There's also a lot of citing in a lot of the records from every direction that Caravaggio was a very proud, very touchy painter. So
you're talking about this, and I was thinking about how, if I was Caravaggio, how would I get back at them? And I started picturing him painting these fruits and flowers, but with faces. And it made me think of that Angry Orange or whatever it is from YouTube, you know, like the...
I don't know what you're talking about.
You know it? Annoying Orange? That's what it is, Annoying Orange.
Annoying Orange?
You know?
I don't know that.
All right, well...
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, I don't want to derail us too much more than I already have, but...
What would be more insulting than flowers?
Dirt?
Yeah, I was thinking like a brick. Can you paint it? Listen, fruit may be beyond you.
Yeah, maybe. So while he was working in the studio, he did two of his own paintings. So one is called Boy with a Basket of Fruit, and the other one is the so-called Sick Bacchus, or Self-Portrait of Bacchus. So the Boy with a Basket of Fruit he has a model, and it's a guy that is wearing kind of like a toga that's fallen off of his shoulder, and he's holding a basket of fruit. And it's just like this very like young, vivacious looking boy holding like the title is exactly what it is, but it was beautifully done. And then what's interesting about and why it's titled the name Sick Bacchus is the Bacchus. Are you looking at the Sick Bacchus?
Mm-hmm. Sick. The Sick Bacchus.
Yeah. So typically
it's because he's shredded. That's why.
So this is a self-portrait. That's Caravaggio in his like early 20s.
And he looks sick.
But if you do notice, like if you zoom in and can look, his skin is very like sickly looking, and his fingernails are like dirty, and some of the fruit is actually like molding and dying. And so he actually does look sick, and Caravaggio sort of leans into it in the painting. And so it sort of was a lead into his style where he wants to do realistic, like real portraits of real people. And that's something that he does so differently from anybody else. Like, you feel like you had something to say.
Oh, what's this painted with? Is
oil.
He using oils? Okay.
Yeah. So he uses oil paints. He even, at one point, he's like commissioned to do a fresco, and he does it with oil paint because he doesn't know how to do fresco. So he does like some sketches and stuff. The other thing about Caravaggio, how he works, is he does not do any pre-sketches. He doesn't do any pre-planning. He gets models, he sets them up, and he paints them live. And there's like a lot of actual kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? scandal, maybe, where people tried to talk about how he wasn't actually talented and how he was like faking it somehow and using like trickery with mirrors and stuff to get such accurate portrayal. But he really was just like painting from what he saw, because that's what he had to do. So he didn't have any, like, he has no, Leonardo has just books and books of sketches, and he's like practicing with musculature and all that kind of stuff. None. Caravaggio has none, because he didn't do it. He just painted. If he didn't like a painting, he just painted over it. So, I mean, because he's not going to waste the canvas. So what's most likely is he was looking at a mirror, which is partially why the shoulder has this kind of funny foreshortening, because they think the mirror was slightly convex. And so the angle is kind of a little bit more extreme than what you would think real life would be, because he's painting himself in a mirror. Neat, right?
Yeah.
Look at that dude's traps. he's so strong.
So, what's interesting is the nephew of the Pope, and his name is...
Okay, hold on. Uh-huh. I like that he still did fruit.
Yeah.
That he was like, you want me to paint fruit, huh? I'll paint the
paint you
person
some fruit."
holding fruits. They never saw it coming.
Like when they come in, he like covers the portrait part. He's like, just painting fruit. Painting fruit over here.
You've done it again, Caravaggio.
You scamp.
You sly devil, you.
But what's interesting is that the nephew of the Pope, and his name is Scipione Borghese, he loved these paintings. He was a big fan of Caravaggio. So he came to the brothers. Their name is pronounced Cesare.
Oh.
Remember this for me because they come up. Cesare. All right. So the nephew, and this is Scipione Borghese. He liked him, so he offered a price to the Cesare brothers, and they refused to the Cesare brothers. I don't know how to say it.
A price?
So he offered to buy them.
The paintings?
The paintings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the price was lower than the brothers thought appropriate for the paintings. And so Borghese had them arrested on made-up charges. and then he appropriated their entire collection of paintings, 105 of them, which included the 2 Caravaggios, which he took for himself and are still currently in the Borghese Gallery. So he got what he wanted. So, like, after this time, or during this time, it's hard to know the exact timeline, again, because not a lot is written about it. But while Caravaggio was still working for the brothers, he started painting more complex aspects of paintings for them at their request. There was a painting in particular that he was working on, which I neglected to write down and I don't remember. But the brothers did not want anybody to see that Caravaggio was working on it, and so they would not allow anybody to see Caravaggio, and he was kind of hidden away while he was painting this painting. And during this time, he was kicked in the leg by a horse, and his leg swelled up hugely, and he became really ill. But the brothers still wouldn't take him to the hospital or summon a surgeon because they didn't want anybody to know that he was there working on them. But somebody that knew Caravaggio, in the writing, they say it's most likely Lorenzo. You remember Lorenzo Sicilino or whatever it's called? Mm-hmm. The first person that he worked for when he got there probably found Caravaggio, and that's who took him to the hospital. Because he was eventually taken to the hospital, and he never worked with the brothers again after that. So he departed in sort of a dramatic sense. And again, they noted and it's throughout frequently that they noted that Caravaggio was a very proud and touchy man. In fact, he was gifted but fatally proud is what he's described as. And this is written by his nemesis, but it said he was bent on dragging art down into the gutter, leading it toward mere unthinking replication of reality. which I thought was really interesting because Caravaggio is painting like real stuff, and trying to paint it as realistic as possible. And it's partially what he becomes incredibly famous for. But these other artists were like, it's so real. You're just painting what's real. It's disgusting. And like you're tarnishing art, which I just thought was so interesting because I was like, but it's magnificent what he does with it.
I guess maybe they felt like you could see real life just by looking at it. But real art has, been interpreted by the artist. I don't know. So I think similar attitudes could be taken about photography, right?
Yeah.
Some people are just like, it's just a picture of what
you
there.
saw, yeah. Which is how a lot of people saw photography when it first came around. Mm-hmm. That it wasn't an art; it was like a form of documentation.
Yeah.
So, anyways, after leaving, he tried living by himself, painting many self-portraits since he couldn't afford models. And at this time, he painted a painting called "Boy Bitten by a Lizard," which that's exactly what it is. Again, there's more fruit and flowers in it, but it's just a young boy that gets his finger bit by a little lizard.
Is there a lizard in the picture?
Uh-huh.
I was looking at it.
Yeah.
Where did it go?
And he sells this painting for next to nothing, but it's by means of selling this painting that he's introduced to Maestro Valentino, which his actual name was Constantino Spada. And it's through Constantino that Caravaggio meets Cardinal del Rey, who is an art lover and a crucial figure for Caravaggio. He is an absolute lover of Caravaggio's work and gets Caravaggio out of a lot of legal trouble. And there's two paintings that really are what kind of got Cardinal del Monte to buy into Caravaggio. And those two paintings were the Gypsy Fortune Teller and the Card Sharps, which are sort of the mark of what he does for the rest of his career. If you look up the Card Sharps, like card sharp instead of shark, same meaning, but it's the Card Sharps. You can see what they've called, and this was a new concept never before seen, and they call it the low life drama. And it essentially is like a portrait of this like low life interaction of these two card sharps that are cheating this young noble. And you can see that the card dealer has cards hidden in his belt that he's hiding from the noble that he's tricking, and then his accomplice is standing behind him like holding up two fingers to indicate what the young noble has in his hands. And you can see they have like tattered clothes, and the like two fingers at the end of the two glove parts are open at the end of the like assistant's fingers are open, and so you can see how like frayed the glove is. But it is not just that it's a portrait of this kind of low life drama, but it's done in a very theatrical way, because in reality, if you were dealing with actual card sharks, they wouldn't be so obvious to gesture like, oh, he's got the number 2 in his hand, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But they would have much more intricate like secret codes or knocks or whatever it is, so they wouldn't be found out. But this is done in a way so that all of the viewers can understand that the noble is being taken in by these two that have this like system set up.
That'll show them.
Yeah. But and it's interesting because Caravaggio includes things that were realistic at the time. So the reason that you can actually see the two fingers of the assistant's hands are open, because a lot of card sharps at that time would keep the fingers, those two fingers, like the skin shaved down so it was really sensitive, because if you can feel the card, you can tell the difference of the color and the suit just by feeling it with that really sensitive skin. And so they would keep it like that so they could touch the card and know what it is that they're handing. And so he includes like real things that were really going on, even though it's done in this like sort of over the top theatrical way. So and the if you notice the composition of the painting, he's like real tight in, so you feel like you're part of the group watching the thing happen. And this is another style of composition that Caravaggio does, where he sort of draws the viewer in and brings you up close into these compositions, where other painters have sort of kept you looking at the scene as if you're viewing from a distance, or you're not really interacting. But a lot of his paintings, you feel like you're interacting, you're right there with the people. And that's part of why it was this like drama that he was able to capture, this like emotion and drama, and it was really charged, because they felt like they were, you know, in these paintings almost. So then after that, he receives his first major religious commission, and it was secured by Del Monte, which was later referred to as quote unquote his cardinal, because he was constantly helping Caravaggio by getting him commissions and again getting him out of trouble. And he was commissioned to paint the Calling of St. Matthew, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But from here, he's able to make a whole bunch of paintings of varying subject matter. And many of them included like very smooth skin, idealized boys. So at the time and throughout history, Caravaggio's like sexuality was called into question. And it hinted it in writing between people that were talking about his artwork that they were like guessing about his sexuality. But it's fairly well agreed upon both then and now that he was fine with both men and women. He was kind of whatever. So he just sort of seemed to like beauty no matter where he found it.
I'm getting quiet again.
Yeah, introspective,
Sorry.
Josh. And
really tune in, listeners. When he gets quiet, it gets good.
It gets deep. Now, Mr. Salad.
And it was after he started getting these big kind of commissions that he started to get to be more famous. He could kind of experiment more. He even started doing paintings that would sort of pit him against Michelangelo. The Michelangelo.
The Michelangelo?
The Michelangelo. Because...
Of whom he shared a name with.
Yes, which he shared a name with. But Michelangelo was renowned as the like top Renaissance artist. And so Caravaggio was often commissioned to do paintings that sort of mirrored Caravaggio. Mirrored Michelangelo. And so he really had this desire to compete at this really high level, because that's where he thought he was. And he like successfully, they continued to ask him to do it, and he would successfully paint these really beautiful pieces. Oh no. This is the problem with being on my phone. Oh, I'm in the same spot. But throughout it all, he still continued, even when he's getting to be more successful and he's getting these big commissions and he's getting money, he remains the same turbulent emo boy. So it's often said, like, away from the painting room and away from his cardinal, it was like he was a second person. Like he was, split into two people, where he was this like painter striving to make the church happy and do all of the things that the cardinal wanted him to do so he could be successful and make those church connections. But then he was also living this like nightlife where he was often out in the early hours of the morning, and he was getting in constant fights and duels and that kind of stuff. And he continued up his swordsmanship ever since he was younger. He was an excellent duelist, and he continued that throughout his entire life. So on the 11th and 12th of July in 1597, 3 men were summoned to appear before the tribunal of the... Gosh darn it.
The tribunal of the gosh darn it.
Of the gosh darn it.
Sounds serious.
Yeah. I keep touching buttons on my phone and I lose my spot. The tribunal of the governor of Rome. So Caravaggio wasn't actually brought in to question in this case, but he was described to perfection by one of the witnesses, though the witness professed to not know who the person was. So there was this crime that was done, and some evidence was brought to a barber, and the barber was explaining to the police who brought it to him, and it was Caravaggio that brought it to him. But the barber explained that this painter, of which he didn't remember his name, came in for trims frequently and would come in to get wounds stitched up frequently. Because if you remember, barbers at the time were both like doing hair and like stitching and medicine.
Yes. I learned that from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Really?
Is that...
Yes.
I learned it from school.
I didn't know it, period.
Oh, yeah. They say that's why the barber's pole is white and red, to represent the white of the apron they wore when they were like trimming your hair, but also the blood that was there.
Blood.
The blood. Because they were, I mean, you'd go to get a haircut or you'd go to get like doctored up.
That's funny. When I watched Puss in Boots,
The Last Wish.
The Last Wish, I just thought that the town was so small, he had to work 2 different jobs to
There
pay
was
the
no one else
bills.
to do it.
Yeah,
Historically
just like-
accurate. So here's how he described Caravaggio. This painter is a stocky young man, about 20 or 25 years old at the time, with a thin black beard, thick eyebrows, and black eyes. He goes dressed all in black in a rather disorderly fashion, wearing black hose with a little that were a little threadbare, and who has a thick head of hair long over his forehead. He was often cited wearing all black clothes, and he was often said to be wearing fine clothes that he had worn until they were falling to rags. So he only liked to have fine clothes, but he couldn't afford a lot of fine clothes, so he would just wear that clothes until it was threadbare, until he could afford a new set. Again, on May 4th in 1598, he was arrested for bearing arms in public. He was wearing a sword with no license, but because of his connections with the cardinal, the charges were dropped, although the police officer did draw sketches of his sword and dagger. And so he was kind of clearly living in this constant, dangerous, on the wrong side of the law kind of thing, where he was constantly getting pulled into jail, and then he would be back out, because of his connections, so that he could do more paintings. And he was described as going out with his friends, following their motto of "nec spec nec meto," which meant without hope, without fear, because it was his little gang's motto. And all during this time, he was still receiving commissions. So he also, at this time, there was a young sex worker named Filde Melendroni who posed for many of his paintings. So like Judith and Holofernes, and he was the Mary Magdalene, I think. And she also was often in trouble with the law because she was a sex worker. But that did not make Caravaggio shy away from her. In one of the trials, one of her trials, she ran into trouble because of her pimp, Ranuccio Tomasoni. So Ranuccio Tomasoni. And he was described as a polite young man, but he would become a very bitter enemy of Caravaggio. And that's an important detail for later. And in 1599, Filde, she appears in one of Caravaggio's masterpieces, Saint Catherine of Alexandria. And he had sort of, with this painting, he had sort of invented this new style of approaching the painting, where he essentially sort of perfects this. It is kind of a shortcut for him, because he sort of keeps the background very dark and nondescript, so that we focus in on the figures, and it really, really pushes that tenebrism we were talking about last time.
Right.
Those like extreme darks and those extreme lights, and this is sort of when he really nails this in, and he keeps that going for the rest of his life.
Now he's making pictures of ladies.
Yep, he's got Filide in a lot of them. And she was, which like some people really didn't like, because she was a sex worker and she was being painted as these like
As saints.
saints.
Right.
Yeah.
She's got a halo.
And people didn't love that. And Judith with Judas slaying Holofernes is like a apocryphal biblical story that's painted quite frequently. Caravaggio's isn't my favorite because she sort of has a face where she's like, "Ew, this is a little bit gross." And I think there's other people that have done it better. But that's Filide. That's the same sex worker as in these other ones. So with this style in mind, he finished the commission, the calling and the martyrdom of St. Matthew. So the paintings, so the calling of St. Matthew, I absolutely adore. I think it's a beautiful painting, and it's often one that's cited that shows this really extreme tenebrism and the way that he sort of decides to tell his stories. So in the painting, you see it's in like a tavern, and St. Matthew is at a table, seated at a table with other people. And you see Christ is actually like behind to the right, obscured behind another person and shadow. So really all you see is kind of his head and his finger pointing at St. Matthew. And it sort of turns the story from this like outrageous biblical experience that not a lot of people could connect with to this moment where, you know, the poor viewing this would say like, oh, I've been in a tavern. I've been surrounded by people like that. I've seen like figures like this. And it suddenly becomes something so real and so tangible to them. And so the paintings were really, really powerful to a lot of the viewers that were seeing this.
It's interesting that they're in contemporary garb, right? Like it's Christ there's calling Matthew, like this is a
like
scene.
It happened that day.
Yeah.
Like the day Caravaggio painted it.
Yeah. That's it's just this contemporary, like these are definitely like these are men dressed as they would be
in the 1600s
as the people who are viewing it.
Yeah. Which is another way of drawing the people in and connecting them. Which again was something that was not done by other painters, and it was something that the cardinal loved. And so these paintings were very well received by a lot of people, though it did divide it a little bit.
Do you think anyone has done The Last Supper, but like modern day? Like everyone's just in jeans and t-shirts and stuff, and
no, but I've seen one done where Goku is sitting as Jesus. And then all the rest are different anime characters. So
just as good.
Nerds be nerding.
But wouldn't that seem insane? Like today, if you were like, I'm a famous artist, I made Jesus, here he is wearing Jinkos. You know, like everyone would be like,
no,
get that baggy pants Jesus out of here, right?
It's true.
Now I'm trying to picture all classic pictures of Jesus, but he's wearing Jinkos. Like the lady's reaching out to touch the hem of his robe, but it's the super wide legs of his pants. Who touched my sick jeans?
I bet some people would really love that.
Yeah. Do you remember they had the pockets that go down to the knees? Mm-hmm. And there was some that had like an embroidered like bomb or something on them. I don't remember super well.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to picture Jesus wearing that, and it's fantastic. And now I think that I'm going to... Brandon found me a picture of Jesus with a tattoo.
It says Father.
Yeah. He's a masculine modern day Jesus.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
Oh no. He's wearing like jeans and a white t-shirt. Oh, that face is awful. He's like, hey baby, I'm here for my father. Oh, it's so bad. Yeah, I don't know.
It's real bad.
Yikes.
So listen, what I'm trying to say is Caravaggio is fantastic, but this particular artistic choice I disagree with.
Well,
interesting.
And maybe that's, it does say that it divided, they had divided opinions, so you would be on the other side.
Yeah, I would have been the one over there going, that guy.
Put those guys in robes.
I like my Jesus classic.
Yeah.
But they still instantly established Caravaggio as one of the leading painters in the city. But even with all that success, it did not mellow him or his behavior in any way.
Why would it?
Does success
Success
usually
never does
mellow
that.
people
Yeah.
out?
Well, I mean, maybe you would think he wouldn't have to commit as many crimes because he's got money,
No, yeah, I suppose so.
you know?
Like it does make people less likely to like steal, but if their crimes are like crimes of passion,
Yeah, which
You
he
know.
was.
they're not.
You know.
They're just going to keep doing that. They're going to get even worse.
Yes. So it didn't go well. So in the winter of 1600, he clashed with one of Rome's many unemployed mercenaries. Both men drew swords, and the painter outfought the soldier, who went straight to the courts to try and get Caravaggio arrested for assault.
Okay, so a mercenary has a duel with Caravaggio,
And loses.
loses, and then runs to the court and says,
He assaulted me.
Somehow I got in this duel with this guy.
This guy, for no reason whatsoever.
He's beating up mercenaries.
These artist types are such bullies. Why are they always chasing us poor mercenaries?
Yeah, seriously. And so they said that, anyways, it got kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It didn't really go anywhere, probably because of his connections. And then in November of that same year, the painter was charged with another assault of a young art student. And the art student said that it was a premeditated assault that seemed to be like a vendetta, because Caravaggio had clearly lain in wait for the young student, trailing behind him in the dark. Because again, Caravaggio wore all black all the time.
Like a ninja.
Like a ninja. The case, however, was also dropped, probably because of a lack of evidence or because of the Cardinal Del Monte intervening on Caravaggio's behalf. There was also additional testimonies from other court cases that don't specifically have Caravaggio as the one on trial, but he is present in them. And one account noted that Caravaggio didn't partake in the fighting because he could barely stand from previous injuries from previous fights. And so it just sort of illustrates that Caravaggio was sort of in this constant tumultuous battles, and whether or not he was caught all the time, So again, meanwhile, while this is all going on, Caravaggio is still receiving important commissions. Another one was the conversion of St. Paul and the crucifixion of St. Peter for a chapel. And this was in another example of when Caravaggio is sort of pitted against Michelangelo, because Michelangelo does the same exact pairing of the conversion of St. Paul and the crucifixion of St. Peter at another chapel. And so it was another time for Caravaggio to sort of prove his muster, battling against this like ghost of the celebrated Renaissance art of Michelangelo. The paintings are absolutely beautiful, I think, if you look at them. Again, they have that dark background that he's known for, and a couple other things that he gets well known for. And the funny thing about the conversion of St. Paul, if you look at it on the left-hand side, there is a huge horse taking up a lot of it, and if you'll notice, it's the end of the horse. So there's a big horse butt that is painted hugely, and it's on the side that faces the altar. So when put in the church, it was this huge horse butt pointing straight at the altar, which it was like so cheeky. The other thing was that he had, if you look at the crucifixion of St. Peter, you see that he's already on the cross and he has his bare feet are right up kind of in your face. And Caravaggio was not only known for being this like aggressive painter, but he was also becoming very famous for painting bare feet. Which like
Him and Quentin Tarantino, man.
yeah. Maybe Quentin Tarantino would really like Caravaggio's paintings. But it was something that was controversial because bare feet were inappropriate. but he kept painting them, and they kept getting put right next to altars and in all these really famous paintings.
I wonder if it's kind of a flex, because like looking at the crucifixion of St. Peter, like feet are very complicated. Mm-hmm. Like I wonder if he was like, listen, I can make faces all day. Feet's where the real challenge is.
I think it was a flex in two reasons, right? Because they're complicated, but also they were controversial, and he knew that for sure. And so he's still successful and receiving all of these things where he can still put these things in the art that are controversial and still get accepted. So it feels like kind of a double flex.
Yeah.
But you know, and he's having all this success, and other painters are being successful as well. So he was, to add to his controversial behavior, shortly after Easter Sunday in 1603, there was a couple of newly composed satirical poems that caused something of a problem in the quarters of in the artist quarters. Copies were being passed out, impromptu recitals were being held, and the verses were aimed at, these are the nicknames that they are called, Giona Bagaglia, or Gian Coglione, or John Bagag, or in other terms, Johnny Testicle. And they were all like slanderous nicknames for Giovanni Baglione, which was his rival that wrote the book about him. So this is all aimed at Baglione.
The book that was strangely entranced with him.
Yes.
That he was like, I don't know why other people are attracted to this man and his beautiful aquiline nose and his strong cheekbones. It just doesn't make any sense to me. He's just, in all those pictures, he's so handsome. They say, I don't believe it. I don't see it. But they say that he's a real...
Yeah, he's like, look at those traps.
That's what I said. Oh, no. I'm in love with Caravaggio.
Everybody is, Josh. Okay, so there was two of them that were sent out. And again, I couldn't read the first one because it was so inappropriate. But the second one, I was able to edit enough. I mean, I just changed like one swear word. So it says, call him Johnny Bollock. This man who sets about criticizing another man who could be his master for 100 years. I mean in my beloved art of painting, because he would like to call himself a painter, although he's not even fit to grind colors for that other man. Using colors isn't as easy as 1, 2, 3, even if he shamelessly wants to pretend it's like that. Everyone knows the truth of the proverb, men like to attack those whom they should really be praising. I'm not one for washing my mouth out, nor for exalting someone who doesn't merit it, as he praises his false idol. If I wanted to start describing the pathetic things this man has done, a whole month wouldn't be enough, nor even 2. Come here for a moment, you who like to criticize the paintings of another, even though you know that your own are still in your house because you're ashamed to show them to anyone. In fact, I'm going to stop this humiliation in a minute because I've just got too much material to work with, especially if I start on that necklace of gold, which you so undeservedly wear around your neck. So at this time, receiving a necklace, like a gold necklace, was a huge honor for artists. And it really bristled Caravaggio that Baglione had gotten one. Because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that you should really have an iron one attached to your ankle. As for all that Johnny Bollock has said with such passion, well, it can only be because he's drunk, in my opinion, as he ought to be. Otherwise, he'd just be a screwed-over cuckold. I changed the word at the end.
Sick burn.
Yeah, sick burn. Shortly after, Caravaggio and his friends were arrested for said poetry. But as the case seemed to... as they started to get a bunch of evidence, and it seemed and it appeared that Caravaggio was going to be in big trouble, suddenly the charges were dropped and he was released from prison. And this is where we're going to end for part 1 of part 3. And we will, I promise, wrap up the very exciting second half of Caravaggio's life in episode 21. The Caravaggianing.
All right, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I'd like to do kind of like a little wrap up, you know?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So you're talking a lot about how other people perceived Caravaggio, like looking for little pictures in his painting, like clues of who he is and what was important to him. How do you think, like, given your knowledge of what he painted and how he painted it, how do you think he wished to be perceived?
I think he wanted to be perceived as the best,
Yeah.
the most intelligent, clever, talented. I think he wanted people to recognize his talent was superior. And that's, I think, what he was aiming for in everything he did. I mean, even when he was, like, as it's described, even when he's painting the, like, fruit and flowers, he painted them so masterfully that people made comments about how excellently the fruit and flowers looked in these paintings. And it's so funny because he really did lead this life where he just was, like, constantly pushing. And it was either, like, his swordsmanship, his reputation, his paintings, whatever it was, he just could not be satisfied.
Interesting.
At least that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
A man of passion.
I don't know. His stuff his works are really striking.
Very.
And like I love the later on you mentioned it's kind of his calling card or whatever, the black background.
Yeah.
With but it is really like, it's fantastic, you know. It really draws the eye. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I find myself falling for the man. He's so handsome.
Yeah. Yeah.
His
I mean,
bare shoulders.
I've always loved his work, and he's just so impactful because he's making all these changes that are so different from what they're doing in the Renaissance, that he really is the father of Baroque art. He's the one that sort of set the stage for what the Baroque artists were doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was so unwilling to be satisfied that he was and so desirous to make a name and be different and stand out, that I think that's part of why he pushed to doing this art this way, that he wanted to be recognized and he wanted to be seen and talked about, even if it was slightly scandalous, you know, with the bare feet and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Publicity, no matter what, is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seemed like he just lived this kind of nomadic, like, I don't know, just this life of striving.
Yeah. Very, very much.
Kind of feels like, and now I can't remember his name, but the episode where Dejani taught
Ouija,
right? Same sort of, like, right? Ouija lived in his car.
Yeah.
And was just all about being there for the pictures, and Caravaggio kind of like sort of the same, like just single-mindedly striving and driving for this fame.
Yeah, and I think there's a price to be paid for this sort of thing, and I think that's the price often that artists doing those sorts of things pay.
So I'm going to make a like personal kind of connection here.
All right, try not to make fun of it.
Yes, please make fun of me. This is a discussion Michaela and I have a lot, right? Which is that, and I'm not a fancy pants artist or photographer or anything, but I try to do well at what I do. And no matter how hard I try to do something, no matter how much effort I put into it, if it's a presentation or a project or whatever, or something that I'm writing up, I'm never satisfied, right? And Michaela points this out, that she's like, well, maybe it's just depression, right? Like, maybe this isn't a great attitude to have, to never be satisfied. And there's always a part of me that goes, I don't know, that's what keeps me like pushing to do better and to learn more. Like, if I was satisfied, I wouldn't push myself to try and get more done. But it's also kind of a crappy way to live. Like, I recognize that. Like, and again, I'm not to the level of like Caravaggio or Ouija or whoever who were so consumed by it that it ruled their entire life and led them to kind of be miserable, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that point. I feel like I'm a fairly happy person overall. But I'm way over on another part of that continuum, right, with those people. And I don't know. It's just funny that, like, I think we had the same talk about Van Gogh, that is the struggle worth what comes out in the end, right?
Yeah. I would love to be excellent and amazing like Caravaggio, but his life also sounds awful.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah. I think that the gauge that you need to use to measure is how happy you are. Like, I absolutely know that I am not interested in a life as consumed pursuing greatness as Caravaggio's. And I see examples of similar attitudes in people around me. And there are times where I think about, like, if I was as consumed as that person, I would be as successful as that person. Mm-hmm. I could have as much money as that person. But I just don't want to be consumed.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I hope that just because it's not right for me or not what I want doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong or anything like that. It's just not what I wanted for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a healthy attitude.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm curious if we'll ever come across an artist who's just like super chill, happy person, but they also push the boundaries in every way possible, right?
You know who I think? I know that, like, maybe this isn't it, but I automatically think of Milton Glaser. Do you guys know who that is?
No.
So he's a really famous.
He invented Precious Moments.
No, he didn't. He's a really famous designer.
That's a joke for Mom.
He designed the I Heart New York logo.
Okay, so he's a marketer.
He's a designer.
I'm just kidding.
He's
What's his name?
Milton Glaser.
Milton Glaser.
And he was, I don't know how chill he is, but I just know, like, in my brain, I was like, he didn't have any, like, real drama. And he interviewed people, and he just was like this old guy that was like, I'm good at what I do, and here's what I do.
Sounds like he's boring, and this is the only time he'll ever show up on this pod.
Yeah, there's no crimes involved.
No crimes involved. So yeah, maybe he fulfills that. I'll have to research him more to see if he's, interesting in any other way.
Oh, you know what? He was actually also a serial killer.
He was not.
No, he wasn't.
But he does look like a wizard, doesn't he?
Okay, he does kind of look like a wizard. Here's the way that you know that somebody did have a decent life is when you go to Wikipedia and their personal life is like 1 or 2 paragraphs. And it's just like happily married, 3 children, never divorced. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Boring.
But
he lived in 91.
Yeah, a really famous, really successful artist.
I'm glad that you could think of somebody that fit that description of talented and yet
balanced.
Yeah.
His wife didn't leave him because he was like married to the art. So yeah. Anyways, there's Caravaggio, who was not at all chill. And he gets even less chill in part 2 of section 3.
Oh, snap. It's going to get wild.
It's going to get pretty wild. Let me tell you. Here's a teaser. A little teaser. Tease you a little bit.
Oh.
There's crime involving artichokes.
Artichokes and crime. The new podcast.
The new pod.
This is what we've been building to this whole time. You guys didn't realize art was short for artichokes.
Yep. So, we'll stop there. But as Milton Glaser has proven, you can do art and not crime. So go do those things.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening. Bye.
See you later.
Long.
Oh, at the same time.
This is our new music. You need to do this for the intro music.
I need to do an episode by myself so I can catch up with you guys.
I'm really excited for the just Brandon
Well, just
episode.
Brandon talking to himself.
We would lose so many listeners.
We'll title it "Don't
We
Listen to
can't-
This Episode."
If you like the podcast, skip this
This
episode.
episode.
If you like other podcasts, I don't know, maybe.
Give it a try.
Give it a try.
I love the idea of someone not listening to our podcast who sees that there's an episode titled "If you like other podcasts but not this podcast, listen to this podcast."
They would
And then they listen to that episode and go, "This is a great podcast." And then they go back and this is the first one and go, "Wow, this podcast sucks." They are all the time.